Hello and welcome to part 4, the new HQP platform. And today we're going to go into some depth here. I think you're going to really enjoy this particular one because it's going to help you navigate all the parameters that you see on the HeartQuest Professional. So here, at the top of the screen, these are the 4 parameters. They're numbered in green, 1, 2, 3, 4. Heart rate, SDNN, RMSSD, and the LF to HF ratio, which we'll explain. And on your nervous system screen, you'll see an icon on the top of your HeartQuest, and you'll click on that, and you'll get this screen that I'm looking at right now. And, when you look at this, you can kind of see, well, the heart rate is a little higher than we want it to be, right? I mean, it's 96, so there's something going on there. That's a little too high. And it's in red. It's telling you, that it's kind of over the range, and you guys know that. The SDNN is 36. It's a little low, and that has to do with our ability to respond and adapt. Actually, the autonomic nervous system's ability to respond and adapt and change when change is necessary. And so our ability to adapt is a little bit off. The RMSSD is really low. It's 16. And that has to do with repair and regeneration. And it also has to do with our brakes. When we have a big stress response, we need the opposite, to resist that stress and to bring us back to a nice balanced state. And that's a little low. And the LF to HF ratio, well, the LF, look at the pie. That's the yellow part of the pie. And the green part is the HF. And a lot of people who use heart rate variability are always looking at that balance there, right? And we can see it's kind of not too balanced, really. The HF is really small, and that's your brakes, your ability to, we talked about it, it houses the vagus nerve. RMSSD, they're kind of related. RMSSD is a little bit more stable, and the HF is, a frequency domain, and so it changes and shifts a little bit. But the LF to HF ratio, when it's over 3, and this is huge, it's over 17, and that's because of that LF is so big down below at 81%. And that means the person's probably in fight or flight. So they're in a stress state. They're hypervigilant, right? So this is kind of telling you, the first thing that you might want to look at is to look and get a feel by going down that row. The next thing you might want to look at and go a little bit deeper is the total power. How much energy reserve does this person have? And the optimal range is 1,500 to 3,000. And they're not too bad. They're 1,212, but, it's still not in the range. And the stress index, which is how much stress is on the nervous system, is a little high. And so you can kind of get a feel for this, right? So never, ever try and read one number and kind of look at the overall picture that you're seeing. And you can see this person is definitely in a stress state of some type. So let's follow this pattern. We kind of see that. I want a little bit more detail. So let's look what we see here. Well, on your HeartQuest, you have the vagus nerve screen. On the top, you could click that icon. And you can see that this person has all 3 of the parameters there in red. So the key takeaway here is low RMSSD and low HF percent. They're going to have reduced parasympathetic vagal influences. They're not going to calm down that system, and probably not going to have good digestion, since that is involved with peristalsis and digestion, which is true for this particular person. They have a high LF to HF ratio, so their sympathetic dominance relative to parasympathetic. So usually, the sympathetic is up and the parasympathetic nervous system is down. So the pattern suggests the body is in a stress defense state with limited vagal brakes to slow it all down. So is the body stuck on and not shifting into rest and recovery? And absolutely, that's the case. This person has PTSD, right? What I do when I see this is the next thing I might want to do is look at the brain screen, especially when I see a big yellow pie like that. And what do you see over there? You see the big spikes right there in high beta, right? There's a dominance there. So what does that reflect? That reflects heightened cortical arousal, often seen with ruminating thoughts, anxiety and worry, mental overdrive, difficulty relaxing. The brain is in a go mode instead of rest and repair. So that's kind of a sequence I like to, there's no, specific way that you have to do this. But when I see those kind of parameters, I want to know what's going on with the vagus nerve. I want to know what's going on with the brain. And then that takes me to my next thought, which is, okay, let's look at how this guy experiences life. Does his experience match the physiology? The stress index questionnaire turns the patient's experience into objective data. Now, in your HeartQuest, you can see down there on the left where it says questionnaires. When you click on questionnaires, you'll have different choices. One of them being the stress index questionnaire. Okay. So along with that physiology that you see on the left, where we see the high heart rate and the low SDNN and the low RMSSD and the LF to HF ratio being really, really high, and you see the total power isn't really, really low, but it's low enough, and the stress index is way over what it should be, you know that this person, again, is in a stressful situation, a stressful state. They're hypervigilant, like I said. Then you run this questionnaire because you want some data. And as you work with this person, you want to see these things shift and change, right? So on the stress index questionnaire, in your HeartQuest Professional, it will score it for you. Okay. And you could also send it to the patient ahead of time, which is a pretty good thing to do. Okay. And so his score was 35 out of 40. Very high stress load. And you kind of look at that over there, tense and restless on edge, racing mind, hard to relax, neck and shoulders, chest tightness, so everything's tight. He's in, that's what happens when you're in that state, right? Energy crashes, sleep difficulty, crave stimulants under pressure, emotionally reactive, and trouble focusing and remembering, detached, frozen when overwhelmed, kind of shut down. Heart races, skips, or pounds. And this is a big deal for him. Okay. I'm surprised it's not a 4. Okay. So we look at all this and we go, okay, because he's got a high sympathetic overdrive situation, we're looking at all this stuff. I think we better look at the cardiovascular risk index. And for you, if you click on the last icon there that's in black, and you click that, you will come down to this screen. And this screen, you put in their blood pressure. And it's going to calculate it for you. And it's going to calculate the pulse pressure, and it's 55. And it's going to combine it with all the other cardiovascular risk factors in your HeartQuest Professional that shows up in traditional PubMed and all the research that's out there. And I didn't put it in here, but underneath this on the same platform, you have all the other parameters that show up, and they'll show up in red. And next to it, it says research, and you can click on the research articles next to it. So you can see like SDNN is a cardiovascular risk factor, and so you have that information for you. So what is pulse pressure? Pulse pressure is a measure of the difference between systole and diastole blood, so you're measuring that, and it's going to calculate that number for you when it subtracts systole from diastole. Elevated pulse pressure is commonly associated with reduced arterial compliance. You lost your flexibility there in that vessel and increased vascular stiffness. Why does pulse pressure matter? Reduced arterial compliance, increased vascular stiffness, increased left ventricular workload. The heart's got to have to work harder if the arteries are stiff to pump that blood through a stiff artery. Increased cardiovascular risk in many populations. So on the bottom there, he has a score, right? 95 out of 110. It calculated that again based on all the other cardiovascular risk factors plus the pulse pressure, which is 55. So he's got a high risk. So it's good to know that because a lot of you have some really good strategies, and we will give you some as well to be able to improve and help that, increasing nitric oxide. And there's a lot of things that we like to do, and that's just one of them, using enzymes to make sure the blood's flowing well, like Bolucki and nanokinase and those kind of things. And, strengthening the heart's not a bad thing to do with Hawthorne and all those kind of things as well, increasing mitochondrial function. So anyway, I want to thank you for listening to this part 4. It's really short, which is great. I think you'll appreciate that. You now have a map. Start at the top, find the first abnormal pattern with heart rate, SDNN, RMSSD, LF to HF ratio. Number 2, find the pattern. Let the pattern point you to where you need to go next, which could be the vagus nerve, maybe it's the brain screen. I just put that in there because this matched this particular case. We'll do more so you can see other cases. Follow the clues. Use HQP screens to reveal the full physiological story, Ask the patient, compare their experience to their physiology. That's the stress index questionnaire. Check the risk. Bring the clues together and evaluate the cardiovascular risk index. One parameter at a time, let the pattern tell you where to look next. In this particular case, what seems to be helping him is he's doing electrical vagal nerve stimulation, and he's doing the neurovisor. And when he does that on a regular basis, it really helps him. And again, that's all she wrote for today.